Hey, Fellowship Asheville, welcome to our ConvoCast. We are in season 2 of our ConvoCast, where we are introducing you to the deacons and staff. And today I have one of our deacons of finance, Lee Scott, with us. So Lee, introduce yourself to those who are watching and listening. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, Fellowship. So I'm Lee Scott. My wife, Brooke, and myself have been going to Fellowship now for about 5 years. I work at the Biltmore Estate here in Asheville. I'm the treasurer and vice president of finance and technology. So I've worked at Biltmore for going on about 20 years now.
Have you really? Did you start when you were 10?
Yes.
Yeah,
I was very
that's
young.
great.
I was very young. And my wife, Brooke, is a high school teacher at AC Reynolds High School. She teaches 10th grade English. And we have a 2.5-year-old son named Braden, who is full of life and keeps us on our toes in many ways, especially in the last 12 months or so during this crazy time that we're living in.
Yes, nothing like having a toddler and a 2-year-old in a pandemic, I would imagine.
It's been fun.
Yeah. My wife and I were talking about our kids are older. One is in college and Luke is 17. And we were like, gosh, if we had little kids during this time, it would be like a different kind of awful, I think.
It's definitely been a challenge. And, one of the things we figured out, which I wish we would have figured out a while ago, is in watching church. We've been trying to watch when we can, but having a 2.5-year-old running around, it gets hard. So we have started turning on certain cartoons for him to watch during the service. And in the last, month or so, it's helped us quite a bit to actually be able to absorb and understand what's going on.
I bet. Yeah, the art of distraction is a good parenting technique.
Yep,
Well, that's great. Well, Lee, what is something that most people don't know about you? When they first kind of get to know you, what's something that might surprise them?
I think one thing that is just kind of interesting about my personality is I've done some good study on the Enneagram. And
what are you?
I'm a type 5, so I'm an observer. So I'm very quiet. And I wouldn't say completely shy, but at first I can definitely be a little shy. I'm very much a deep thinker. So I process things. Hence, one reason why I think I was a good fit for finance deacon is kind of deep analytical thinking.
Yes, praise Jesus for that. Yes,
so
because I don't. Whatever the opposite of a 5 is, I'm probably that.
So I tend to be quiet and reserved.
Yeah. What's your wing?
I think my wing is probably more towards a 1, which could kind of be probably a little more of a perfectionist.
The perfectionist,
oriented.
Yeah.
I know that's where my stronger side is.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, I am an 8 with a 7 wing. So I am the, I forget what their word for 8 is. You read the description and you think, oh, they're the jerk. That's what they are, which they can be. An unhealthy 8 is a jerk.
Though, because people think because I'm very quiet, I'm kind of
you're kind of snobby. Yeah.
It kind of goes different ways.
Yeah. So I'm an 8 with a 7 wing, which is the fun side of things. So and it's interesting because when I was doing the Enneagram stuff and trying to figure it out, like when I read the descriptions and I read the book, that Ian Morgan Cron's book, The Road Back to You, as I was reading about an 8, I was like, oh, that's, I knew I was kind of 7, 8, 9, somewhere in that area. And what's interesting with you being a 5, like that 5 and 6 is the stuff, the ones that I know the least about. Like I read those and went, nope, move on. Like I didn't pay my
that's what, sometimes people have a hard time kind of associating with that, and you don't come across a lot of 5s. A 6 is more of a hard skeptic. I'm not as much of a skeptic.
Okay.
Pretty optimistic.
Okay.
But to me, it's been helpful to understand who I am. And kind of get more comfortable with some of the things that come with my personality. So it's been very helpful.
Yeah, it is. And that's the whole point, I think, of the Enneagram, is that it's just a tool. It's helpful. Like even in the beginning of the book, Ian Morgan Cron says, some personality assessments, gosh, what was his quote? It's something like, no personality assessment is perfect, and some are helpful.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
The Enneagram is helpful. Yeah.
No models are perfect. Some are helpful.
Yeah.
Anything like a projection is kind
Right.
of that way too. So,
Right.
But, I do work in the finance world, and that kind of fits well with my detail oriented and kind of analytical thinking. So
absolutely,
that's how I ended up there. One other thing.
So like, okay. So I got a question, and then come back. So do you ever come home, and what's Brooke on the Enneagram?
Brooke is a 3.
She's a 3. Okay. She's a performer. So yeah. So do you ever come home and tell her, like, babe, I got to tell you, I saw the most exciting spreadsheet today? Like, does that ever?
Okay. I don't normally do that. Okay. It is interesting. One thing that is interesting with us is, like, our need of time, and almost love languages, so to say, is very different. And that was one thing in our relationship, especially as we got married. We really had to learn, like, I need quietness and time to process. Brooke needs to be able to speak and talk about what's going on and really kind of, move things out. So that's, both of us understanding that about each other has been very helpful.
That's relationship changing.
Yep. And I mean, we went through re-engage about 3 years ago, and kind of going through that process was really good for us to kind of help kind of keep understanding each other, and it continues to evolve each day. But
yeah, that's great. Well, thanks for sharing that. Of all the interviews, I think you're the first one that we've talked about the Enneagram, which is interesting. I figure it would have come up by now. But it is such a well-known personality assessment. So how did you come to know Christ?
Well, before I talk about how I came to know Christ, let me say one other thing that most folks don't know about me, because it's important, because I was talking about my wife. So we've been married going on 6 years. It'll be 6 years this summer. So I met Brooke when I was 10 and she was 5. Some people know this, but our mothers worked together. They were both school teachers. So we met in 1990. We didn't get married until 2015. So
wow.
So 25 years later, we got married, and we had connected, about I guess a year and a half before that. So that's kind of an interesting story.
That is, like, do you remember?
A lot of folks don't know about us is that we actually knew each other when we were younger.
Yeah.
We went and lived life and went our separate ways for a long time, and then we reconnected, and here we are today.
So do you remember her when she was 5?
Oh,
really?
I definitely do. And she remembers me too. But
that's fun. That's fun. Not too many couples can say that. That's pretty cool. Okay, well then how did you come to know Christ?
Well, I grew up in the church. Both of my parents were very active in a sort of medium-sized Baptist church. My mom was a Sunday school teacher. My dad was the guy that, I wouldn't say he was always deep in his Bible, but he was the guy that was always there doing something. So I spent a lot of time around church growing up, and it was important to our family. At a young age, I accepted Christ as my Savior, and always kind of kept that close. And even as I got older, through college and into early adulthood, that was very important to me.
Did you go to church through college? Like, were you connected with the church when you went to college?
Yeah,
oh, really?
I was relatively connected. I mean, I wasn't connected to a church and where I was going to school, but at home, I still stayed connected. And then in my mid-20s, I had a group of friends that we went to church a lot, pretty regularly, and kind of really started to kind of almost kind of reawaken my spiritual needs at that point in time, and really kind of start to understand what they were, not just kind of sort of have them ingrained in myself. But I would say I really spent a lot of time just kind of wondering, really until I met Brooke. And, Christ was always close to me, but I was focused on some other things, with myself, as many of us do.
Yeah.
But, once Brooke and I met, a lot of those things really clicked, and we've really worked hard to kind of grow together. And that's one of the things with COVID that's been so hard is, continuing to kind of move towards Christ in the way that we feel like we should in this weird kind of isolated community.
Yeah.
So I think it's really tested us, but at the same time, I think in some ways it's challenged us in a good way as well. And, hopefully as we start coming out of this sooner than later, I think we've done some things to really position ourselves in a good place.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. And that's a great word to use this season, is it really is a test. And a test, in James, it says, you'll go through trials. And when you do, consider it pure joy because of what it produces, that it produces perseverance and endurance. And like, that's what a test is it kind of shows you where there's cracks in the foundation and how to shore those up so that when you come out of the test, when you come out of the trial, you're better for it and not worse. And so I love to hear that you and Brooke feel better equipped coming out of this than you did before. Better position. That's good.
To me, some of the biggest learning experiences in life have been the hardest times. And I'll be honest, has this year been the hardest year? Maybe not at any given time. Cumulatively, maybe yes. I mean, it seems to keep going. But we've also been extremely blessed, in the last year too. So, being open to, God and kind of understanding how He's working and moving in our lives. And, I'll be honest, we'll probably look back in 20 years of this period of time and actually have some good memories. Yeah. Like, hey, remember when I went for a walk and the sky looked so blue and I could hear the water in the stream? Things that we don't normally think about that we were able to stop and enjoy. I think we'll reflect on one day.
Yeah, I do too. I think there'll be, when we look back on this time, we're going to miss the pace of it in many ways. Even though we've all been working really hard, it's been at a different pace to where, as you work from home, you've been able to go for a walk with your son. And before 2020, as you were working in the office, I don't know, are you full-time back at the office?
Yeah,
or did they let you flex?
In the office now.
Okay. Like you don't get that opportunity to go for it. You don't get that opportunity to wake him up from his nap and all that stuff. And so I bet you're right. There will be things that we look back on and we miss during this. Now that I think there'll be things we look back on and don't miss, but I think there'll be some things that we definitely do. Yeah. Well, you've stepped into this role of deacon in finances, and thank you for sharing all this too. It's really cool. We started deacons. Well, we started them really during the pandemic. We started the process before, and then everything shut down, and we still move forward with having deacons and getting those roles established. And so we have 3 deacons of finance. Well, 2 now. We have you and John Perry, and then Ryan Smart was a deacon of finance, but he's moved to Kansas City because of his work. We're still holding out hope that he'll be back here in a couple of years, but we'll let God to handle the future. And so this role of deacon of finance is kind of a new role. Y'all kind of forging the way into what this looks like. I'm curious though, from your perspective of what made you say yes to being a deacon?
Well, Fred, I can kind of turn back, I don't know if you remember this, but I remember the first time we talked about this, and it was before the world kind of flipped upside down. But I ran into you at Target, and hey, you mentioned, hey, we're thinking about looking at some deacons of finance, and you just asked me to think about it, and I was like, wow, that's kind of interesting, and that was how the concept first came up. I was like, how awesome is that conversation? And as we kind of went a little farther, we talked about it, and one of the things we talked about was, how can we use our kind of talents and gifts to sort of serve God's community and help it to really kind of grow and prosper. And that was something I really thought hard about, quite a bit. And, I think back kind of the point that I was making about my dad, growing up is he was always very present at church, and he kind of plugged in the gaps and kind of did things based off of what his skill sets were. It might not have been teaching, it might not have been singing in the choir. And I kind of thought about, what are things that I can do to kind of help God's community in the greater good? And, whether I like it or not, I have this gift of being analytic and knowing numbers and being able to take that and kind of help the church and help the elder team and you, Fred, and the administrative staff team to be able to give some guidance and wisdom. It really made a lot of sense to me. So that was kind of what drove me, to saying yes, was like thinking about how can I help, and how can I take the talents that I have to help serve God and grow His community.
Well, I sure do appreciate your gifting, because it is so vastly different than mine. Like, I understand budgets and Excel spreadsheets, but I don't geek out over them. I mean, I look at the profit and loss statement, and I am like bullet pointing in my mind. Okay, I want to know income. I want to know expenses. I want to scroll through real quick and see if anything's way out of line. Done. But to have somebody gifted to be able to dive deep into that stuff and to be able to look for trends and to be able to ask questions that I don't even know to ask is so helpful to us and to the elders. And for those of you who are listening, the question popped into my head that you might be asking is, what do the deacons of finance do? And so just to kind of put a frame around that, in the general sense, they're there as advisors. The deacons of finance don't really make any decisions about our money. They don't make any directives with our money. They're there to advise us on where we are, where we're going, what trends they're seeing. And if we have something specific in mind, they're there to give us wisdom on and good stewardship and on those lines. And then to kind of dig through the numbers. And then once we start meeting in person on a more regular basis with a larger congregation present, they're also there to collect the offering on Sundays out of the boxes on the wall and all that stuff. So, but that part we haven't even really gotten to do yet, because we've been in the pandemic. And even though we've been meeting in person, most people are giving online at this point. And so it's really not a good use of volunteer time and energy to schedule someone to collect the offering. Like last week when we did it, there was like one check in there because everybody's given online. So, but one day I think that'll come back. Well, thanks for sharing that. I think talking about gifting and talents and passions is very important when trying to figure out where to serve and where to serve in the church. Well, let me ask you this about being a deacon of finance. How have you seen God move in this ministry, or what have you seen God do while you've been a deacon of finance?
Well, I think from the church standpoint, really, I'm going to say probably back to maybe May of last year, once we kind of started getting more heavily involved and kind of, digging in, is, it's really amazing how God has blessed the church financially. And, in this tough economic time, which maybe isn't like a true economic recession, but it's definitely different. We have been able to get good tithes and offerings continue to come in. We've been able to kind of tackle some projects and things to help the facility better and also help make everything better for when we do return. The picture could have been a lot different, and we probably thought it would be a lot different. Yeah. Probably in April of last year. And I think it's just another testament, of God's love and blessing upon us. And sometimes we have to be patient for it to work out. But, so far we have fared really well. And, I think that's really one of the biggest, things that has stuck out to me. And, that might not be something that resonates for everyone, but, last March and April was an unbelievably scary time for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And to be where we are today, it's just amazing. Yeah. And it's just a great blessing from the Lord.
Yeah, I agree. As you think about being a deacon of finance and and maybe looking to the future of this a little bit, what would you love to see happen in this ministry?
One of the things I've really kind of enjoyed, in the process through our meetings in the last 8 or 9 months is interweaving with the other ministries that are very important, to the church, like prayer team and, facilities and things like that. And really kind of getting an understanding, of some of the other things that are going on, and, seeing how these different parts of the deacon ministry are almost really a part of the bigger wheel of the serve nature that Fellowship Asheville has. And, I've really enjoyed kind of getting to understand that. And I think as we continue to build the deacon ministry, I think that's a big focus is, from a finance side, how do we use some of these financial resources to really help drive prayer or building maintenance or care teams and things like that?
That's great. That's great. Let's see. One more question is a question that I've been asking everyone is, how would you describe Fellowship Asheville in one word? It can be a hyphenated word, and I will allow up to 3 if it's a phrase. See how this has evolved as people have asked me questions about the one word thing. So how would you describe Fellowship?
I would really say, one thing that sticks out to me is love. And this is going to sound weird that I feel it a lot, even though we physically have not been in the building in a year.
Yeah.
I still feel it a lot. And that's something that's been very important to me, in the last year, is the love and community that our church has. I miss seeing a lot of people, and there's a lot of people that we still don't know. So that's been kind of, hard to have this, separation, but to continue to feel the love from the church in the past year is amazing. And example I'll use, back in November, we were at home for 2 weeks with a quarantine period. We didn't have COVID, but we had to go through quarantine. And luckily, Brooke and I were able to get back into the real world. And Brooke sent me the email from Mondays with Miss Megan. And she was like, hey, why don't you and Braden get on this? And we got on it. He had a good time. I think I had more fun than he did. And to me, that's a perfect example of the way that the church is loving on its members. So we've been home a few more times, unfortunately, in the last couple of months, and we've been able to do it. And, we get the things in the mail. And February 1st, we got the prayer for February. And it was a prayer that was really helpful for us. So, to me, I think the love that the church shows is just immense, given this kind of challenging time.
That's great. Well, Lee, thanks for your time. Thanks for this. You are a joy. I'm glad that you're deacon. I'm glad you're at Fellowship. I'm glad God made you just the way he did. So thanks.
Well, thank you.
And and for those of you who are watching or are listening, if you are watching on YouTube, go ahead and click subscribe. The more subscribers we have, from what I understand, we're able to get a specific URL for Fellowship Asheville. I think we have to have 100 subscribers. That's what I heard. I don't know if it's true or not, but I do know it helps if you subscribe. So if you haven't yet, when you subscribe, it'll also allow you to get notifications of when these come out. They come out every other week at this point. So y'all, thank you for being you. Thank you for being Fellowship Asheville and for what God is doing in and through this church. I love y'all. And I do love being the church with you. So I'll see you next time.
See you.
Thanks, Lee.